This is Risky Women Radio, a show that connects, celebrates and champions women in risk, regulation and compliance. We're here to share the insights on the biggest issues in our industry and hear inspiring journeys from our global members. Sign up to our newsletter at riskywomen.org. I'm Kimberly Cole, your Chief Risky Woman.
Hi, Jo. Thanks for joining me on the Risky Woman podcast.
Hi, Jane. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'll do a quick intro of you. Obviously, you've got a very impressive bio. So Jo Shoppee is the head of non-financial risk in technology division in ANZ Bank's group risk. Jo is a commercially focused risk executive with extensive technology and finance sector experience, deep expertise in technology, risk management, and a track record for building effective and trusted relationships. She's got a strategic mindset, a collaborative style, and passion for leveraging data and modern technologies for better customer, colleague, and community experience. Jo is also well-versed in balancing the desire for risk-taking in pursuit of strategic results, whilst honoring the need for disciplined risk management to safeguard business value. Welcome, Jo.
Thanks, Jane. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
Great. I think it would be a good idea to kind of start where your journey began. Obviously, you have a very interesting background, and in risk management, there are fewer women and also fewer the higher that you go up. So I think it's quite impressive that you've built a very successful career. And I would like to begin with understanding how you got into risk management and what inspired you to choose this path.
Great question. And I think, when I think about my career in risk management, I would characterize it as a happy accident. I'd love to say that I chose this career and the path was orderly. And when I look back, it's certainly it's logical how I landed where I am today. But if you had have told my 19-year-old self when I first walked into my first branch as a teller at ANZ Bank that this would be the career path that I'd have, it would have been hard to imagine. So I certainly began my career in the front line. Prior to tallying at the ANZ Bank, I was actually in retail. So really developed that kind of customer centricity and that real passion for advocating for the customer early in my career in the formative years. And ANZ was also the first opportunity for me to move into technology. So I moved into technology as a user acceptance tester in the early 2000s, or actually late 90s. And that gave me a real insight into the opportunities for a technology career. And I think early on in my career, it was very much tech focused, so delivery, project management, user acceptance testing, assurance and the like. And it was probably the early mid-2000s that my risk career really took off, and that was post sort of some of the really corporate failures of the likes of Enron and WorldCom that led to the reforms around compliance and legislation like Sarbanes-Oxley and Basel II, that we really started seeing operational risk management start to be something more than good process management in technology. And so my career started shifting from one of technology focus to a risk focus within technology. And it kind of just ballooned from there. So it's probably been the last 5 to 8 years that my focus has been more broadly risk in technology than technology delivery and operations itself. But yeah, I'd love to say it was an orderly choice, Jane, but as I said, it's probably a happy accident and one that I'm really thrilled with.
That's great. I think I speak to a lot of, obviously I'm in risk management myself, and I speak to a lot of people, and I get a similar response that, the career path chose me, not me. So it's great. And I didn't actually realize that you started in ANZ as a teller. So it's a full circle, which is very interesting.
It is. It is.
I think I want to move on to your challenges and achievements. I would like to know what sort of significant challenges that you've faced in your career. And obviously, our audience is mostly women. So, as a woman, how that might be different for you and how you overcome that challenge.
Yeah, wow, big question, isn't it? I mean, my mind goes to many places with that question. I think about, earlier in my career, as I was happy in a beautiful relationship, I'm pleased to say I'm still happy in, and we were contemplating a family, and that real challenge between the career path I was on at GE at the time, with lots of international travel, lots of pressure, and a real passion for the roles that I had and the career that I was enjoying, and so to work through that process of, well, how do I prioritize this other huge part of my life that I really want to invest in? So probably there was a period of about a decade there where I had my three children, and navigating, I was already a senior leader at that point in my career, and navigating the pressures and challenges of that was probably the most significant thing that comes to mind for me with that question. And I remember I had an amazing head of the people team at the time, and I was seeking his counsel. And I remember seeking his counsel on what do I do, how do I balance these demands in my life, and was really entertaining going part-time, which I ended up doing, spoiler alert. And he said to me at the time, if we can't make this sort of thing happen for senior leaders like you, then what hope do we have to make it happen for our broader workforce? So we then sort of colluded to become really campaigners for making that senior leader role part-time, and still enjoying a really fruitful, high exposure career. So I'm pleased to see we were able to do that at the time. That was during my time at GE. And I guess what I would say is I turned that from what I saw as a challenge to one that I saw as a crusade, and simply sort of then started to march through that to open the door for others that would follow. So it gave me just that extra kind of incentive to not be, frankly, broken by a system that of norms and cultures and unconscious biases that really prevented that sort of radical shift at the time.
Yeah. And I think there are still parts of the world or parts of different organizations that women still face these challenges. So I think it's good to know that there are avenues that, people can work through with their senior management or leadership team to make it work. So it's really great to hear. Do you think being a woman has also benefited you in managing risk?
Look, I think so. I was, as I contemplate that question, I think there's a range of emotions and a range of perhaps strategies that women have in their communication style, in their interactions, in the way they build relationships, that really brings a different dimension to the workplace generally. And I think that's certainly true in risk management. If we think about the hardest days in risk management, and particularly in a role like mine at the second line, and probably even more so in former roles at the first line, and the kinds of the review and challenge and the tension that's built into the system across the three lines of defence, I would say that being able to negotiate from a place of compassion for each other is really important. I'm not suggesting for a minute that men don't necessarily have compassion, but I think the social norms that we have in our cultures and in our workplaces is such that there's perhaps a greater opportunity for women to demonstrate and voice that passion, that compassion. And I think that does bring a dimension to conflict or, disagreement that really benefits teams and individuals from being able to work through that conflict and that disagreement.
Great. And I think we've worked with together before, so I've experienced working with you and dealing with challenges together. So I can certainly walk through what you're saying. Let's move the conversation more towards risk management and innovation, particularly. There's a lot of rapid evolution happening in technology around the world, and it's been a topic of mind for all of the senior executives across different industries. How do you stay ahead of managing those risks or risks related to technology?
Yeah, staying ahead, right? I think at this point in time, it's more about trying to just keep up. And yeah, look, I think, sure, there's a lot of change in technology, and we think about just the advent of Gen AI in recent years and the race that organisations are enjoying at the moment to get there first, or to introduce innovation through various technologies, cloud and AI being two probably key top of mind at this point. But when you strip it all away, without diminishing the complexities and the opportunity with those sorts of technologies, risk management 101 still applies. And so I think it's important to keep up with the developments and the language and the types of opportunities that these technologies bring. But it fundamentally doesn't change what good risk management principles are. And so I find myself, when I'm involved in conversations, what are we going to do now? Gen AI, how are we going to cope with that? What does moving to the cloud mean? I find myself coming back to those risk, 101 principles. And I think that brings a sense of calm and a sense of control to the conversation, and it helps people understand that just because we're dealing with a new technology or a new risk, it doesn't mean that we don't know how to do that because we've done it before. So I stay abreast of developing emerging technologies and try and make sure that I know enough to be dangerous in terms of the vernacular and what certain technologies are seeking to do. But I also hold my space in ensuring that the technical experts that I'm dealing with can actually answer questions that help me understand it at a layperson's level. So while I might be able to talk to them on a technical level, I'm not going to be the technical expert in their field. And I'm also usually relaying information to non-technical people. If I think about executives and risk committees and board conversations, these are not typically technologists, and so it's really important for me to play that translator role. And so, in order to do that, one of the strategies I employ is to always ensure that I can translate to layperson's language, and I hold the technicians, the technical experts, accountable for really helping me do that.
Great. I think it goes directly to my next question, which is, during your tenure, how have you seen risk management change, or the approach to risk management change? So I think you've touched on that already, but do you also envisage any kind of shaping to different the future and the industry?
I'm seeing a lot of change. In fact, right now in the role that I have at ANZ, I saw much similarly this kind of change in my former role at Bupa and even at GE before that. And that is this almost this. There's certainly we're bringing in more technology. We're recognizing the need for data and analytics and insights, and that necessitates the introduction of more sophisticated methods to manage risk and controls. And so I think we've certainly seen that shift from paper-based, spreadsheet-based into more system-based risk management systems. I think as we've shifted towards that, I would say the risk is, or the danger is, that our focus moves to risk process management rather than risk management. Something I'm pondering a lot of at the moment, like how do we stay outcome focused and not get kind of caught up in the weeds of day-to-day management of the processes that enable us to digitalize our risk management system and then derive insights and analytics from it. And this might be a familiar phrase to you, Jane. You may have heard it when we were working together. I always say to my teams, the data is the what, the insight is the so what, but what's the now what? So how do we turn the data that we've now got into our systems into insights that are then actionable and meaningful? And what I do experience, I think, as I've seen the shift towards greater leveraging of technology and data in our risk management approaches, is a potential for complacency, that we end up admiring the problem rather than actually getting to the risk outcomes. So I think that's a danger that we probably need to remain vigilant on, and make sure that we're not just sort of sitting there looking at our dashboards and going, oh, that's interesting, but rather actually getting to, well, so what? What does it actually mean? Is it a useful dashboard? Is it, and what action are we going to take from it? So I find myself repeating in many meetings these days, or what are the outcomes, or so what's the meaningful action from that? I think we've seen that real shift away from, perhaps if I think about the early 2000s with the introduction of, Basel II and Sarbanes-Oxley, and then on from there, sort of the reforms post the financial crash of 2009, that the environment is more data rich, but that means it's busier. And so there's more opportunity for distractions. So I think, remaining vigilant and coming always back to, what outcomes are we seeking? What outcomes are we seeing? And if our plans or our results are not as expected or as required, what actions are we taking for that? So there's a lot of noise in the system, I think, today, and we've got to remain vigilant that we still drive towards outcomes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've also noticed the shift in the industry towards automation and using, obviously, AI to help with risk management, and hopefully we'll be on this journey quicker than anticipated, and we can focus on the outcomes rather than just focusing on the process to get the information out. I want to go back to the point that you made earlier, and I thought it was a very interesting way to put it, is you've mentioned we tend to look at and admire the problem rather than getting to resolving. Do you want to expand a bit more on that?
Oh, the hot seat. I think, I wonder how many people that might be watching this interview think about the number of times they've looked at a dashboard that hasn't really changed, or, a committee report that sort of says risks are all, stable, and ask themselves, have we become complacent with what we're measuring? Are we curious enough about what we're looking at? And so I think we need to make sure that if things are stable, that we don't satisfy ourselves that, we can sleep well at night. We actually ask ourselves, are we measuring the right things if we're seeing things that are stable? And are we able to look at those things in the context of outcomes? And probably one of my bugbears is, if our risks are all stable on the risk profile, why are we seeing outages? What's causing those outages? And how do we have a feedback loop from the operational performance back to the risk profiles? So I think there's more we can do, and this is where I think, more sophisticated analytics or greater data literacy, and the use and leverage of new technologies such as Gen AI, or just plain old AI and robotic process engineering, can really help to inform that. So long been a crusader in operational risk management to learn the lessons from, financial risk management. So think about credit risk or even information security. I think they're really advanced in how typically you'll see security teams modelling threat scenarios and developing heuristics around their threat landscape. I'd like to see a little more of that in the operational risk management side. It's certainly around technology management, change management, service management, and even more broadly across other dimensions around people risk and conduct risk and the like. So I think there's much more we can do in operational risk management than we have, and looking at the heuristics that might and the inputs that might be leading to the sort of outcomes we're seeing is kind of a real area of interest of mine, kind of tapping into the frustrated data scientist that lives inside me.
Yeah, certainly. I think I agree with you. Obviously, certain types of risks are managed well. I think there are a lot of either scrutiny or focus on it, but it'd be great to have the similar level of risk management, data availability on those risks as well. Just moving on to more around leadership. So obviously you've been leading for many years and you've been a risk leader for many years. How would you describe your leadership style? And more importantly, how do you think it has evolved over the years?
Leadership style. I think I used to describe myself as a servant leader, but I'm not sure I would use that phrase anymore. I think I used to really identify with that. I think at the heart of what I meant by that when I used to use that phrase was that my primary motivation is to create an environment where my people can thrive. I think a servant leader now is almost it's not the right phrase for I think the way that I do lead today. I think I would describe it more as a compassionate and purposeful leader. So still at the heart of that is this real motivation to create an environment where my people can thrive and build an environment of trust and psychological safety, and then get out of the way and let them fly. And so that's my people leader side of my leadership style today. But I've become perhaps more so over the last 5 years than any other time in my career, very conscious of the need to have kind of an individual presence as well. So where I may have once directed all of my energies into my team in that servant leadership style, I now appreciate that I can actually do a lot more for my team if I have this individual presence and brand awareness of myself into that kind of peer group and upward management. So I now see the real value of that and the need to actually take some time for that and invest in that brand value and that proximity to power and the reputation that I have with peer groups as an individual, not just as a leader. So that's probably how it's changed for me over the years. Is just, I wouldn't say dialing. It's like when you have an extra child, your heart you don't sort of divide the love up. Your heart gets bigger. So there's a little bit of that going on, I think, with me, where once upon a time I was uncompromising on the investment I would make to my team. And I now understand that, I need to manage my time in a way that I invest in different strategies that have equally or greater impact on the environment that I can create for my team.
This episode is brought to you by Protiviti. Protiviti is a global consulting firm with deep expertise in transformation, risk management, and compliance. Partner with Protiviti.
How do you think you mentioned serving style leadership? How do you think that was shaped because of maybe potentially social norms as opposed to something that you chose as a leadership style intentionally?
I think certainly I've benefited from some extraordinary leaders over the years, and particularly I spent 20 years at GE, and it was a university for leaders, really. And so I think that's probably where I formed most of my belief system, I guess, around what a good leader looks like. Prior to that, certainly ANZ, I had, again, a number of extraordinary leaders who championed my development. And I think what I carried through that was, as I was rising through the ranks and as a kind of an entry-level, junior, kind of mid-level leader through those years, what I saw was this championship of me. And probably and so that's where I formed this view, this belief system that servant leadership was the way to go, because I had these extraordinary leaders and look what they did for my career and look how they helped shape me. Surely if I modeled that, then I'll be able to have the same sort of impact for others. What I realize now is I was only seeing the element of leadership that was impacting on me. And so what I wasn't seeing was the other dimensions to their successful leadership. And I would say if I look back, I don't look back and have regret in life in many places. And this certainly would be an area where I don't sort of look back with regret. But if I was able to tell my younger self something, it would be to get to kind of connect and I had mentor relationships, but I probably didn't have the kind of relationship that helped me see this mysterious other side to senior leadership in the way that I've experienced it over the last 5 years. So I would probably tell my younger self to get a little more curious about what else those leaders were doing in the fullness of their careers and in a typical day in the life of a senior leader. And then perhaps I might have kind of got there faster myself. But I think about that, those sort of dimensions where we're shaped by our own experiences and we see others, behaviors, performance, actions through our own eyes. And so there was a lot perhaps I wasn't seeing as, my younger self that I now see. And so it's added certainly additional layers, additional dimensions, and I think increased my effectiveness in creating that environment for my team to thrive as well.
Yeah. You've made a good point about how the organizations that we work for actually shape who we are as a leader or as a career person. So that was a very nice distinction. I hadn't actually thought of that before. So it's a very good point. I think you've mentioned before that how your leadership style has impacted your team over the years. Do you have any kind of specific or significant example that you think of how your leadership style has impacted your team or approach to risk management in general?
Yeah, I think probably the common thread that I would weave through several of my past and even current roles is my willingness, maybe ability to face into long-held tensions or long-held norms in the kind of the subculture of the organisation and seek to really identify what's at the heart of that and change that. So I think there are always, particularly in the 3 lines model and particularly around a relationship between first and second line or first line and internal audit, I think there's lots of room for disagreement. There's lots of room for tension in those relationships. And so I think I probably bring a curiosity to that, particularly in a new role, and I'll bring a curiosity to that and I'm probably, if I think about my 2 highest values, they're integrity and inner harmony. And so and they come out to play when there's tension in a system. And I don't need to necessarily operate in a harmonious environment to have inner harmony, although it's much more pleasant to operate and to work in a harmonious environment. But one might wonder why you choose a role in the 3 lines of defence if that's what you're seeking. But the inner harmony is more about, seeking to do the right things in the right way. And so I seek to bring that to that tension and look at ways that we can perhaps understand each other more deeply and understand the perspectives that different parties are coming from. So I'm often referred to kind of as a peacemaker and someone that can kind of come into a situation and compassionately consider both sides. And to some, I've been accused over the years of kind of flip-flopping from one side to the other, but I think that's necessary, and it's not about choosing sides. It's actually about stepping to one side of the table and having a look at how it looks from that point of view, and then kind of stepping to the other side of the table and having a look at how it looks from that point of view, and looking for common ground and looking for deeper understanding, or identifying misunderstanding and seeking to bring parties together. So that's probably I'm not sure if that answers your question, Jane. That's probably one thing I would say is a kind of a golden thread through how I lead, is to seek to not only double down on, supporting my own team, but actually seeking to understand more deeply the other points of view that might be in the room that actually lead to ultimately, hopefully, greater harmony, but if not harmony, certainly understanding and a deeper respect for the different points of view, because I think the nature of roles in the 3 lines is such that there is natural tension. There's meant to be, and sometimes when we're doing our roles well, it results in disagreement. It results in, potentially noise, or even sometimes complaints about, the stance one party is taking over another. And I think, we're mature adults in the working environment. We need to be able to face into that in productive ways, and also accept that recommendations may not be taken up, or points of view may not be agreed on, and ultimately there's someone that has decision rights, and that we can accept that and kind of get on with things. So yeah, I like to think I bring a maturity to that, curiosity to that, and a compassion to that, motivated to understand different points of view, and then move forward together in the best way possible.
I think it's a valuable ability to be able to see from a different perspective. I don't think many people are able to do that. So I'd say it's certainly a strength. Yeah. Moving on to diversity and inclusion, obviously it's been a topic on a lot of leaders' minds. There's been a lot of diversity and inclusiveness initiatives happening around the world. From your perspective, how do you see diversity within a team affect decision-making and decision-making in risk management as well?
Well, I mean, I think we all know by now, or we've all heard by now, that diversity is only good for business. And the more experiences, the more diversity you can have, whether it be gender, sexuality, religion, ethnicity, ability, or experience in various roles. We bring to the table our lived experience, and so the more breadth of lived experience that we can bring to the table, then the greater the opportunity for innovation and creativity, and indeed the greater opportunity to identify and deal with unconscious biases, because we all bring those to the table as well. So that's kind of the general stance I take on diversity, and I wholeheartedly believe in that. And then when I bring that down to kind of when I think about gender diversity in particular, and I've had some experience with this, obviously being a woman myself in what is a fairly male-dominated environment with technology, and also previously in kind of manufacturing and data centres. I had some stints in those as well, and often the only woman in the room. And so that, coupled with then some experience I had at Bupa leading the tech agenda program for technology, which was the Bupa technology, gender diversity program. What I kind of learned, I think, through that is, it's one thing to focus on the numbers. It's another thing to then get to the engagement that's necessary. So a couple of things that I think about around diversity. One is, focus on the numbers, get the numbers right. And, I've heard people say, we shouldn't be talking about the numbers. But if we're not talking about the numbers, I hope that's because we're at parity, not because we've hit some 25% target or 30% target that's been set. So I get a little bit triggered when I see things like a 30% target of women in technology, for example. And I go, well, why 30? Why not 50? And I get all of the academic reasons why it's not 50. The notion of women dropping out of STEM subjects and, not having the talent pool to pull from. I am a little bit controversial on that and say, bah humbug. I don't agree. Okay, there might not be a talent pool that allows everybody to go after parity, but if you're serious about gender, then go after parity. The second thing I would say is the numbers can lie. So you might have the numbers on any given day, but you also need to look at attrition, and are you actually keeping, or are you keeping the women, or are you recruiting constantly in a churn to replace the women? So check underneath the top line numbers and look at what the story really is under there. And then my second would be engagement. So, most organisations will do some form of a pulse survey, culture survey, engagement survey periodically through the year, and looking at the differences in the experiences women may have, or other groups around diversity might have, is also another clue there. So when I think about diversity around the table now, I think about, do we have balance in ethnicity and gender and ability and the like? But then also, do we have parity in participation around the table? So we might have the diversity around the table, but who's speaking? And invariably, what when you open your mind to that and you start becoming conscious of that, what you typically find is there's a smaller subset of people speaking more often. So I think it's really important to get under the numbers and have a look at, what's the culture within the organisation, and who's speaking, and what's engagement like, what's participation levels like, and what's retention like.
I think in my past experience, risk management has been considered very male dominant, risk and compliance specifically. Do you think that is still the case, or have we shifted more towards parity at this point?
I'm certainly seeing a shift. I'm not sure I'm a good measure of that, because I've shifted out of, this is my first role out of technology for about 25 years. So my role now, I'm certainly seeing, I'm rarely the only woman in the room. In fact, I'm benefiting, I'm enjoying being half of the room, and sometimes even the majority in the room today as a woman. But I'm conscious that that's outside of a technology environment. So I think within technology, there's still work to do. There's still work we need to do. But I've certainly seen that shift more so over the last decade than perhaps any other time in my career. I've become aware that I now I notice if I'm the only woman in the room now, whereas once upon a time I noticed if I wasn't. So I think that for me is kind of an anecdotal indicator that things are changing, but I'm not sure. There's still certainly pockets, pockets where that wouldn't be the experience, I think, of women.
Yeah. I think I've been noticing the shift myself as well. Even in my team, I think we're majority women in risk and compliance team. So I thought it was an interesting shift that's been happening over the years. So as a leader, you're a very experienced leader. What advice do you have for young women who are aspiring to be a leader, specifically in risk management, if they choose to do that?
I think,
Or technology.
what's that, sorry?
Or technology.
Or technology. Yeah. I think we hear a lot, get a mentor or get a champion. And I think that, don't underestimate the benefit, the value of having a really close mentor relationship. And also, I've come to learn the difference between a mentor and a champion, and don't necessarily just go for one. I think I would recommend for a young woman seeking leadership in any of those disciplines, whether it be risk, technology risk, information security, or technology or elsewhere, the value of having mentors and women mentors as well as men, but also then champions are really key to growing your career. So I think mentors, this value for us all to have a mentor or a couple of mentor relationships to explore and develop and have an outside in curiosity on experiences that we might have. But then I think separate and additional to that, identifying a champion within an organisation or a field that you're interested in growing your career is really key. I'm not sure that's specific to women. It's certainly, I think, true for anyone. But I think being purposeful about it as a woman is probably the key. I think we've still got some societal norms at play that probably advantage men in developing some of those relationships in a more informal way, whether it be, I know plenty of women love motor racing and footy and play golf and like a beer at the pub. But the social norms that still exist around some of those things, I think mean that there is a greater opportunity for men to develop those informal championship relationships. And I think to young women, I would say be really purposeful and specific about that. Find yourself great mentors and find yourself great champions. Be really clear about who they are in the organisation and how they can actually help ensure your name is in the room when conversations are happening about opportunities for growth and development or promotions or succession planning.
I think you raised an interesting point about having mentors, and specifically around having diverse mentors, so men, women, and also potentially people with different experience. I think that would really help a young professional to have different experiences or different advice to help with their career, regardless of what they choose to do. Are there any specific skills or experience that you think they should seek out? Maybe if they want to be in risk management, is there certain risks that you think they should know about or study?
I think, again, at the risk of saying, my career journey is the right one, I think it is invaluable to have frontline experience in any role, but particularly in risk management. I think it helps you maintain a vigilance and the realism to the often rather abstract world that we operate in. I think so that would be one thing. If I think about the things that stand me in good stead in my role now, it would be, frontline experience, customer centricity, born out of that frontline experience. It would be and these are somewhat generic, right? This is before you get into some of the technical skills. It would be having a deep passion for doing the right thing and doing things right. And so I think I developed that in my formative years at GE, who had a culture of integrity beyond that I'd ever seen and before or since. And that is the spirit and the letter, and not only following the letter of the law, and you think about in our world, regulation and legislation, but also seeking to understand what the spirit of that is. And that's actually at the heart of compliance and regulation, right? It's actually about codified rules that are set to ensure that the expectations of our community are upheld in our conduct and our actions and our operations. So I think, a strong sense of moral and ethical action and behaviour is really key. But then I think, I've benefited. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm a bit of a paper collector. So I'm really motivated by learning both informally and formally. And I think really focusing in, if you're looking for a technology risk career, then I think there's a lot to be gained from studying. There's many industry options around that, but certainly one that I tend to favour and have over the years, it's been really valuable to me, is the range of courses available and certifications available through ISACA. So when I look across my team now, there's a breadth of certifications and experience and knowledge that's been gained through a range of, whether it be COBIT or NIST or ITIL learning and development. So I think particularly in technology risk management, information risk management these days, there's quite a lot that you can do to develop your knowledge and understanding of those environments with formalised courses. So I think there's quite a bit to do to invest in there, but never discount the value of just good old-fashioned experience and diversity of experience. But yeah, if I had to choose one thing, Jane, it would be frontline experience. It's just and whether that be, organising to visit and be, be in the frontline environment in whatever organisation you're operating in at the time, or actually taking a role there for a period of time or doing a rotation there. I think it's an extraordinary developmental opportunity for everyone.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think I've been in consulting for a long time, and when I moved into first line, that's when I really understood the impact of the recommendations that I was giving and what it actually means to manage risk. So I think it's made me certainly a better risk manager and advisor as a result.
Yeah, I would say the converse is true. My journey right now is to move from the first line to the second line, and I get a real sense now of the kind of, what I call it anxiety, the kind of pressure I felt in the first line around delivery, and the compromising effect that compromising pressure that placed on diligence, and moving to a second line role. Got to say, I'm actually really enjoying being able to sort of really immerse in that just diligence without the pressure of delivery. But I'm very, very conscious and compassionate towards that, the reality of the pressures that our teams are facing in that more first line role. So yeah, probably the converse with probably nice bookends, Jane.
Yeah. So my next segue is around personal insights. But before we get into more personal topic, I would just like to ask what you think the top, 3 maybe risks might be for you or for leaders like you in financial industry.
Top 3. I think I feel like this is a bit of a vox pop. This is going to go on I think geopolitical risk is soup du jour at the moment, right? I think certainly that's one that's getting a lot of attention. Emerging technologies is another, and how are we going to ensure that we have ethical conduct and ethical practices around Gen AI in particular. And probably the other one that is top of mind for me would be almost this Art Nouveau version of concentration risk that we're seeing with the hyperscalers that, if you think about the shift to the cloud, and even now AI and the hyperscalers that exist globally around that, and then the concentration, that risk that is generating in in a way that we probably haven't seen since we started really looking at the geographical concentration risk a couple of decades ago. And then underpinning that, I think particularly, in fact, where you bring all three of those together, so you've got geopolitical, you've got emerging tech, and you've got these hyperscalers, and all of that runs on energy. So if we think about oil and we think about coal and we think about energy, then they might be the three, but probably the macro level one for me would be probably energy security at this point. And I think about, I think about the huge demands we have now on power for large language models, and this insatiable appetite that organisations around the globe have for adopting Gen AI. And I think about the hyperscalers that are innovating to give us easier access to more exciting innovations around the use of Gen AI, and that's all. It needs to be powered. And it's we're seeing that the demand for power go up. So I think energy security is probably at the heart, probably the thing that if I had to choose something that would start keeping me awake at night, that's probably the thing I would choose.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I recently heard a fact that the data centers are obviously requiring much more energy because of the use of AI, and it's and that data center uses thousands of household energy in a single day or single hour. So it's the impact is big.
Yeah, and I think I saw a headline last week. I want to say it was Amazon. Don't quote me on that. Certainly one of the hyperscalers, I think it was Amazon, has just purchased a nuclear power plant in the US, which really goes to the kind of bets that the hyperscalers are starting to have around energy as well. But yeah, I think it's a real emerging risk that we better all keep our eyes on.
Yeah, certainly. I think I've seen the same headline as well. All right, so I would like to close the podcast and this interview with something a bit more personal. So I would like to know, outside of work, what your passions and hobbies are that you pursue in order to help you balance your work and life and family.
I'd love to say firstly, Jay, that I'm still practicing daily yoga, but I've kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit. So really doing that so much. I'm looking forward to a summer on my paddle boards. That's like my favorite place in the world outside of being at home with my family is out on the water on my paddle board, particularly on days when the dolphins pop up.
Wow.
So yeah, that's sort of my favorite pastime in summer. I really enjoy, although I haven't gotten to it as much this year as I have in past years, a cold water dip in the sea in the winter. So I live near the sea in a beautiful part of the world, and so my pastimes outside of work really centre around walks along the beach, paddleboarding, dipping in the sea, and when you're not finding me there, you're probably finding me in the kitchen baking something or making something. So they're probably my favourite pastimes, and one probably new one that's actually arisen, perhaps less healthy, but certainly really enjoyable since I've taken on this new role and I'm spending a little more time in the city is discovering all the hidden bars of Melbourne and the best cocktails, rooftop bars. So that's kind of a little bit of fun as well. But I do try and temper that with a little more walking on the beach and a little more dipping in
to balance it out.
Yeah.
All right. I think that ends my question. Thank you so much for your time and indulging me in many different topics and questions. I really appreciated you sharing your insights, and it was great spending time with you.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Jane. It's been really nice to catch up.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Risky Women Radio. Be part of the ongoing conversation and learn more about our events and other programs at riskywomen.org.